I finally met the love of my life. What I didn't expect was to have to pay all of my salary, all of my savings to keep her happy. I mean, we had one of the most luxurious weddings in town, but it wasn't enough for her. After we got married, she starts telling me how she resents it because I can't buy her all these luxurious stuff that she wanted. And guys, when I told her, hey, we really need to cut down on the expenses, you will not believe what she said, and it's the reason I'm here posting today. I used to live a very decent life. I had everything under control. My finances, my love life, my relationship with my family, everything was good. I'm a big lover of discipline, and I hate spending excessively because it never leads to anything good. My parents knew not to ask me for more than I could afford to give them, though I did give more because, like I said, I was in control of my finances. That was until I met Stephanie, my wife at the moment. She's a beautiful woman in every sense of the word, and I never thought I would be one to fall for her beauty because I've spoken to and encountered enough people in my lifetime. But something about her made me lose everything I held dear to me and focus on one thing: to make her my wife. Well, you know what? I succeeded at that, and for the first time in my life, I wish that I had not achieved a goal I set my mind to. You see, Steph was very, very hard to pursue. With my previous dates and girlfriends, all I needed to do was be charming enough and take them out to a good dinner and everything would be fine. I wasn't hard on the eyes and I made sure to eat well and work out at least 4 times a week, but with Stephanie, nothing moved her. She had denied going out to dinner when I invited her out and suggested coffee for a first date, and I had not expected her to be so frugal, even given the way that she looked. No offense. I had met her at a friend's birthday just to get together, and she was interested to talk to. It was the same way during our first date, and after insisting several times, she agreed to go on a more expensive date with me. I should probably say that Steph tried warning me that this could happen in her own little way, and as beautiful as she wasn't the brightest person and had not done well enough in college to get a good job. She used to be an athlete in high school and did not pay much attention to her studies because of it. But after an accident, she couldn't run competitively anymore. Steph had also told me that she wanted a husband who would take care of her and her mom without any problem. I didn't think through what she had said at the time, or maybe I did, but I didn't think that she would actually just do that and she might change overnight. I told her that I was more than capable of doing so. My financial records prove so, and after a few more years of spending when I wasn't asked to and doting on her, Steph agreed to marry me. I can never forget what I did during the period of preparation for the wedding. I got the best of everything that money could afford, and I even had to take out a loan for the wedding, all because Stephanie had wanted the most expensive things. She had managed to guilt-trip me into getting those things after reminding me that she had stopped herself from asking too much of me during the course of our relationship. I was happy with it at the time because her being so miserable was annoying at times. I won't say how much was spent because I'm currently ashamed of it. For the life of me, I can't understand why it did not bother me at the time. Maybe I was just seeing the smile of my wife's face that stopped me from seeing that I was nearing financial ruin. In summary, Steph had the best day of her life at our wedding. She told me this herself, and I, on the other hand, had given myself mental slaps when calculating how much I had spent after the honeymoon. So, I tried to stop spending so much in the beginning. I cut off all my personal expenses and made sure to prioritize Steph because she wanted a good life. I promised to give her one, and I intended to keep my promise. I even borrowed some money from a good friend of mine, Martin's, and I was able to keep my wife happy. The money I got from my job as a systems engineer, it helped as well. Now, 6 months after my marriage to Stephanie, I could come to the realization that I can't keep up. I'll have to pay back my bank loan soon. I'm owing Martin some money, and I keep paying the bills late. Also, Steph has noticed that I'm struggling, and Martin had even suggested telling her everything, reasoning that she would be understanding since that was her true nature. After thinking it through, I decided to do as Martin said I should. I believed that Steph would return to her previous nature, and I had thought I was the one who had prompted her to spend money because I wanted her to be comfortable. Well, that wasn't the case, guys. Stephanie seemed confused when I talked about cutting down on expenses, and when I mentioned my financial situation, she looked like she had been waiting for me to say something about it, Instead of agreeing with my decision and supporting me, Stephanie reminded me of the promise I made her. She told me that she was not going to live like a pauper when she was married. There was this one statement that she made that got me wondering if I had heard it right. "You just have to work harder and take care of me and Mom, Christopher." Or something like that, and all in all, it was obvious that she did not care that the entire thing was slowly taking a toll on me. My own coworkers had noticed, but my wife had not, and if she had, she didn't care. She just wanted the easy life I had promised her. And while I had told myself I would keep that promise, I wasn't so sure that the recipient was so deserving. I had to speak to Martin. I hadn't seen him after he had advised me to talk to Stephanie, and the first thing that he did was tell me to take a few days off work and rest. I know that I looked terrible, but it was nice to hear someone I cared about say that to me. As shameful as it was to tell Martin what Steph had said, I had to. He was the one who had suggested talking to her in the first place, plus I needed someone to complain to. He was patient as he listened, and he was surprised when I told him that my wife had told me. There was that look of pity, something I wasn't used to, and I hate it. Martin offered me a temporary solution. He told me to try to minimize the expense and I made around the house little by little and to save up as much as I could. And I did just that. I made sure to do the grocery shopping instead of Steph, who was initially pleased that I decided to help her with the shopping. That was until she saw what I had gotten for the home. Everything was of lesser quality and had completely eliminated some of our usual, claiming that they were not in the supermarket at the time. We had argued and Steph had refused to talk to me throughout the following day. The day after that, however, was a different story. She was full of smiles and apologized for throwing the tantrum she had. She had even prepared dinner for me that night, something she rarely did. Even when we were on good terms, it was her waving the white flag, or so to speak. I wasn't sure what to think. On one hand, I thought that she had acted out of character because I had made her go through things that she was uncomfortable with. She couldn't do or eat as she pleased anymore, and Lord knows how much that had upset her to have made her storm out in such a manner. On the other hand, I believed that she had an ulterior motive. Stephanie was a sweet lady, but I found it odd for someone so easily to forgive like that. Maybe it was the logical part of me thinking, then again she was my wife, and it might have affected her negatively, and from there the guilt set in. I didn't like that I was suspicious of my wife, and if only I had been wiser with our expenses, we wouldn't have been in this situation to begin with. Guess what, though? While I was chastising myself for thinking negatively about Stephanie, I thought I had been right to do so. Look at this. Stephanie met me a few hours ago talking about her mom and how she was turning 50. After going on and on about making the day special for my mother-in-law, Stephanie mentioned throwing a little get-together. However, nothing about what she said was small, and after doing some mental calculations, we'd been spending at least $5,000 on a small get-together she's talking about. I didn't say no to her at that point because I didn't want another tantrum, and I was still thinking things over. Now that Steph isn't here and I'm writing this out, I think she's only reconciled with me because of her mother's birthday. My emotions are a real mess right now, and I can't figure out if I'm being rational or just overthinking things. Guys, is my wife only using me for my money, or am I just seeing things that aren't there because I'm not as well off as I was before? Update number 1, 2 weeks later. Stephanie stopped being nice after a few days. She began to ask when I would give her the money that she needed, and even made mention of going to the bank for a loan and putting my name as the guarantee. So, I lied at first to stop her from going to the bank to do something stupid. I told her that I would get her the money that she needed a week before my mother-in-law's birthday. There was peace in the house for some time until Steph told me more details about the party she has in mind. 50 people would be in attendance, and there was going to be a semi-famous photographer, live music, and an unnecessarily expensive cake. To mention, but just a few items. I told her that there's no way that I would pay for all those things that she's interested in acquiring, and of course it led to another fight. How hard was it to understand that we were struggling and that I couldn't pay for those things? How hard was it to see that a lot of it wasn't necessary? How hard was it to show some pity and work with me till things get better? Apparently, it was very difficult for my wife, and I hated that. And unlike last time where I remained calm as she yelled, I yelled back in her face. I stormed out this time as well, wanting to cool off because being in the same room as my then unreasonable wife was suffocating. A neighbor came over to ask if everything was okay in my home. She sounded concerned, but that wasn't really my issue. It usually started with one person, and before I knew it, the entire street would know that I was having a problem with my wife. Guys, if you haven't guessed this by now, I'm not the kind of person who likes their business to be talked about to strangers. That was another reason I gave in to Stephanie's request, but the main reason was my mother-in-law. She had come to visit, and after I had spoken to her, my guilt kicked in. I decided to throw her a party. Sylvia, my mother-in-law, talked about how she had been anticipating one, especially after Steph had married me. She made mention of understanding if I couldn't pay for it, but her face and words moved to meet me. He hadn't been convinced but ended up giving me some money to help out with the expenses? Long story short, I gave Steph the money she needed, and at least I know for a fact that the party's worth. Yes, a lot of items weren't necessary, but the party was a glamorous one. The food was exquisite, and in the beginning I remained content as I watched the smiling faces of my wife and Sylvia. They were happy, and so I pretended to be too. Until Steph said something that made me mad. The worst part about it was that all I knew for a fact that she wanted me to hear. I was talking to a bunch of her friends, some of whom I cannot recall meeting for the life of me, and she started laughing about how difficult it was for me to get the money for the party. I laughed a little, hoping that would be the end of it, but no, my wife thought it would be even funnier if she talked about me being broke. She mentioned having to eat food of lower quality and having to learn how to manage resources better. By the time she was done talking, I had the fakest smile on my face. I was fuming so much that I had to excuse myself after some time to avoid yelling at my wife in public. She had done the one thing I kept trying to avoid by keeping my feelings to myself, telling other people about our financial situation. Lord knows that she felt no shame as she spoke and laughed with her female friends who did the same. Yes, I was responsible for all the finances, but the least she could do was feel ashamed for me. Instead, she didn't even hesitate to broadcast the events in our household to people I barely knew. You know, enough is enough. I'm speaking to my wife about her actions, and she'll have to stop being so inconsiderate, whether she likes it or not. Update number 2, 3 weeks later. Steph is no longer in the house, and I have a peace of mind for the first time in a while. It's probably annoying to read, but it is what it is. At least I feel a little bit of guilt sometimes, but it's usually vanishing when I remember that she left the house on her own accord. I haven't even begged her to stay, and it was clear that we were both fed up with everything. But at the same time, I really feel a kind of emptiness without her being around. I'm not sure how to explain it, and I can't really place the cause of it. Martin had advised me to do some reflecting, and honestly, it's not as easy as I thought it would be. There's a lot of denial on my part, and I keep being surprised after admitting the truth to myself, and I'll talk about this later because I'm still in the process and I just need to get some further advice. So I spoke to Steph regarding my feelings about how she talked about my financial situation. She told me that I was overthinking things and that her friends did not see it as a big deal. She didn't understand, and I stopped trying to make her get my point afterward. It was like talking to a brick wall, but one that had the potential to get violent if provoked. I couldn't sleep that night, and I messed up at work as a result. I'm currently unemployed, but this was 2 weeks after the evening I spoke to Steph. I still have some money to sustain myself, and I'm currently applying to companies. Honestly, I can't care less how low paying the job is, because at this rate I'll have to get a tenant to live with me as well just to split the bills. I can't be sure of the main reason Steph left. I don't know what I just returned home on my last day at work and found she was missing. I called, and after 2 hours or so, she returned my call saying she needs a break to think. It was laughable, but she's a human being like I am, so I told her to take all the time she needed. Sometimes I think my wife left the house because I had confronted her due to her attitude at her mom's party. Well, while she seemed nonchalant about the entire thing, I could tell it irritated her. Other times I would think it's because of the restrictions I kept putting in place. I had way less money than before and had to dig deep into my savings to keep the power in the house. I can't even help but feel ashamed as I type this. This was money that I had planned to use when things were extremely bad for me, and I never thought that time would come so soon. Now, with the way things are going, I'd have exhausted everything in 4 months. I've talked to Steph a few times now that we live apart. She's with her mom and has told me not to visit. She didn't even have to tell me not to, and I didn't plan to see her until I sorted out my own feelings. I know I love Stephanie a lot, which is why I was more than willing to do anything to make her happy. But it turns out that the version of her I fell in love with, that wasn't hers. The Stephanie I loved wasn't violent or inconsiderate. Stephanie, whom I loved, cared about my feelings and encouraged me to talk about them all the time. Unfortunately, the Stephanie I loved is gone. Gone! I've tried and will keep trying to fix the marriage because I feel weird knowing that it's failing, but at least now that I know that the woman I was in love with is gone, I can truly coexist with my wife. It's way better than a divorce. Thankfully, we're still speaking on terms, and I feel like it's only a matter of time before things get better. In the meantime, I'll just focus on getting a job. I need all the luck that I can get. Update number 3, 6 weeks later. Guys, remember when I said everyone needs a friend like Martin? He's someone that I'll always be indebted to, and I'm grateful that I have such a good friend in my life. As for Stephanie, I suspect that she has moved on already. After all, it's been 2 months since we last spoke, and a little over that since we last saw each other. I'll give my reason soon enough. Living alone reminded me of the time I was a bachelor. I couldn't get a job, and after the interview I've been to, I decided to rest before looking for an employer again. Instead, I started my own side hustle. I also managed to land a freelance job, though it barely pays anything, but like I said earlier, I'm saving again. I can't remember the last time I even did that, because as soon as my paycheck came rolling in, I would settle the bills and give Stephanie money for groceries and her personal shopping. It's nice knowing that I'm adding to my reserve, and while it might not be a lot, it's definitely better than nothing. Now, the thing with Stephanie, at first, I suspected something was up when she stopped calling and responding to my messages. I didn't want to seem desperate to talk to her, so after calling for the first 3 days, I stopped. When speaking to Martin, he jokingly mentioned that she had moved on, but he might be right. She was the one who had initiated contact, and now she's suddenly AWOL? That's a minor reason, though. The 2 major reasons I thought Steph was seeing somebody else was that she had sent a message about a divorce. And about 2 weeks after seeing her text and not responding, I saw her laughing with a strange man as they walked to his car. I was on my way back home from an interview, by the way I failed, and happened to see them while on a bus. So yeah, my wife, or should I say ex-wife, is now happy with someone else, and here I am, struggling to make a living while going through the pain of having a wife like mine in silence. Speaking of Martin, he hooked me up with a good company. It was reputable, and after negotiating salaries, I was hired on a 4-week probation. I'll cut the long story short, I'm a full-time worker now, earning almost 2 times the salary from my previous job, and I'm happy. I'm really just hoping things stay like this for a really long time. Final update. Update number 4, and this one is 3 months later. I'm no longer married to Stephanie. I know, I wanted to fight for our marriage in the beginning, but not anymore. There are some battles that aren't worth fighting for, and I'd have said Steph had moved on. But a slight commotion occurred a week ago. Are you ready for this? It was something I never would have expected, but I know that I had to deal with the situation accordingly. Steph had come to my home asking me to take her back. I don't even know how she knew that I had gotten a new job, but she congratulated me and mentioned making a mistake by asking for a divorce. I told her that I had seen her with someone, and she gave a ridiculous excuse, saying that he was a man who was interested in her for the time being and she had gone out with him just for the heck of it. But her heart was still, and I quote, a beat for me. Steph was really a funny character in my life, and now that she's gone, I can focus on my career and finding a better wife. The latter will take some time, of course, and I can't understand how people move on quickly, and if you ask me, I would say they didn't have true feelings for their partners to be able to get over them so quick. Like in Stephanie's case, I'll be more careful this time and won't need anyone to tell me to run if a woman tries to be silly with me. Steph, she began to call and visit numerous times. I'd actively been acting patient, and must have appeared understanding when she visited the first time, and that was to understand why she wanted to be with me when she had not hesitated to leave. I told her that I wasn't interested in being with her and spoke about the divorce as well. It had taken a while, but I managed to get her out of the house that day. She had almost stayed that night, but I made up an excuse about going over to Martin's. The call began that day after her first visit, and I ignored all of them. I made sure to lodge a hotel a few times, knowing fully well that she would not be able to get into the house because I changed the locks, baby. The few times she managed to catch me at home, she had cooked a meal and cleaned up. I had let her in just because I was getting free meals, and the house was clean. Maybe she thought that doing all that would move me, but it didn't. As expected, she stopped doing that soon enough. There were a few odd things that she did as well. One prompted me to put an end to everything immediately. I remember her sitting and waiting for me outside of my house one evening. Apparently, she had sat at my doorstep so that she would see me as I returned, because I was ignoring her calls and text messages. She had promised to be a better wife, but I wasn't convinced. I wasn't going to take her back no matter what. I had tolerated the first few visits, but no more. Steph is now legally required to stay away from me, courtesy of a little note that I dropped to the police station. It was a report. Now the divorce is done and over, and I'm thinking of getting a brand new apartment. What do you think? It represents a new start for me, and I can only hope that life has better things in store for me. Alright guys, I just want to talk briefly about the route that OP went. There was so many mixed comments in the comment section saying OP waited far too long to do this, OP was a doormat, OP did the right thing, OP should have left a long time ago, OP should still stay with her and give her another chance. I mean, it went on and on with people's opinions. I want to know, the viewers watching right now, what you thought about it, what you would have done if you found yourself in OP's predicament. So drop down in the comment section exactly what you would have done different, or if you would have kept it the same, guys. My name is Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every day, and if you want to be a part of these daily stories, consider subscribing. Guys, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.